Hey everybody, it's Barney Quincy. We are live now. I had to bring Dr. Bernie Siegel on again because, as you guys may or may not know, but when you're dealing with technology, there's an old saying that goes by Murphy's Law. One can go wrong, may go wrong. And with technology, there is always something new to learn. And he was sounding like a chipmunk. So that was part of the reason why we're a little bit over the start time. But we're here and we're ready to go. And and so I can see that a couple of you were having some issues, but we're back on here. Just do me a favor for Carla, Linda, and Judy. Just let us know that you can see me and you can hear me and all is good. And also, of course, as I say in my normal fashion, how does my hair look today? Because I did it just for you guys. So I'm going to bring on Dr. Bernie here in just 1 second. And while you're doing this, to bring on Dr. Again, just leave a comment so I can see to make sure that I know that we're good, because we have had to restart these things. But I think that everything is looking good now. So, all right, Dr. Bernie, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you did your hair too. This is perfect.
Yes.
You know, I used to say that with bald-headed people, I'd always say, grass doesn't grow on a busy street. Using my brain too much.
Well, I shaved my head in 1970s when men were wearing their hair down to their shoulders.
Right.
So it really attracted everybody's attention. They knew I was not normal and was very disturbed, or I wouldn't have done it. It took me, see, if I said to you, why did you shave your head? What is the real meaning behind it?
Yeah.
All I know is I had to do it, and I had to really give the barber a hard time to get him to do it, because he was telling me our sons had threatened him that if he shaved my head, they would get even with him. So I lied to him and told him I'd go on vacation on Friday night, and he shaved my head Friday, and of course then I didn't go away. And everybody was shocked. But what I learned literally was from Jung's writing many years later that the hero's head in this myth is shaved. And Jung went on to say it is similar to what monks do, called a tonsure, Tonsure, which is to uncover spirituality. It's like creating a child's head again and uncovering spirituality. And when I read that, I understood for the first time what I needed to do was not shave my head, but uncover my spirituality and much more that was buried within me as a physician from all the pain of being a doctor and all the things you can't cure and all the things you're not trained to deal with. I always say you get medical information. You don't get an education. You're not taught how to treat people. And the other thing that Jung said that impressed me was the diagnosis may help the doctor, but it doesn't help the patient. For there, the key thing is the story, and it alone shows human background and human suffering, and only at that point can the doctor's therapy begin to operate. Nobody tells you that in medical school.
Right.
Or nobody tells you that Jung interpreted a dream and correctly diagnosed a brain tumor, But if we learned those things, we would be open to talking to people. And my patients learned that I wasn't normal, so they would come in and tell me things without fear of sharing stories, because they knew I wouldn't say that's crazy. I can't believe that. I'm only talking, but I'm not deciding what's said. So you just have to put up with me.
Yeah.
And it's my angel, George. And one day I got a phone call from a lady in the intensive care unit. She said, "Could you come and talk to me, please?" because they all think I'm crazy. So I went up to talk to her. And she wrote a book about this called The Change of Heart, Claire Sylvia. This was a number of years ago. And she said, after the surgery, they came in and they asked me if I wanted something to drink. I said, yes, I'd like a beer. And then I said, wait a minute, I don't drink beer. Where did that come from? But her ultimate feeling was it was coming from the heart and lungs that were now inside of me, from the donor.
Right.
She said, I know I can talk to you about it. You don't see me as crazy while the others, the nurses and doctors here in the intensive care unit think I'm nuts. One night, she goes to sleep. She has a dream. A young man appears in the dream, tells her we're together forever, and that is, he's her donor for these organs. He tells her his name, and the next day she called her family, told them what had happened, and also called the transplant center. And they said, we're not allowed to give out information about the donor. So she told her friends, look up this name, try to find an obituary with his name. And they searched the New England area, found his name, called the family, and the family said, yes, he was the donor. He died in a motorcycle accident with the chicken nuggets tucked in his jacket. He loved them and beer. In the intervening time, while they were searching for the information, she had ridden a motorcycle, found out later it was his birthday, the day she wrote it, and she was the beer and the chicken McNuggets and all these things. And on his headstone were the words "together forever," which he had said to her in the dream. And you can't deny those things. They are facts.
Yeah.
I would hear these things because people weren't afraid to tell me. Yeah. We could go on, talking about mystical experiences, but consciousness doesn't end when you die.
Right.
As a child, I had a near-death experience choking on a toy. I've had a past life experience when somebody said to me over the telephone, and this is not going to a psychiatrist or a hypnotherapist and say, I want to have a past life. She said to me, why are you living this life? Because I was so busy doing interviews and traveling. She said, why are you living this life? And I went into a trance and saw myself in a past life and understood myself more today because of that. And I always say, if I experience something, I believe it. I may not be able to explain it, but I can believe it because it happened. And that's why I say, to me, consciousness is an enormous part of our existence. It lives without the body. Children, there's a book called Mindsight. These are all about people who were born blind, who had a near-death experience. Guess what happened when they left their body? They could see again.
Yeah.
You can imagine not being happy when you don't die. That may sound crazy, but if you've never seen anything in your life and suddenly you do, you're not happy when they resuscitate you and you're back blind again.
You can't.
Yeah.
Well, and that, Bernie, you were saying earlier, let me just jump back on here. And by the way, on your computer or your camera, can you tilt it down towards you a little bit more?
Sure.
And yeah, there you go. And then that way, when I put a comment up, I think, yeah, that's
enough, or
yeah, maybe a little more if you can.
All right.
Just because in that way, when I pull in a comment, then it when people ask a question or something, which by the way, guys, as Dr. Bernie's doing his adjustments there, just any questions that you have for myself or Dr. Bernie, just let us know and just put it in as a comment. But I'd like to just note this real quick. Well, two things. One, with what you just said, Dr. Bernie, but about the normal, that it's not normal. And I think what I've noticed and observed in my humble 35 years of being in Barney Kunze's bodysuit here on Earth is that it may not be necessarily, I think that it actually is normal. It's just not common. And that it's been accepted as not being norm. But I remember one of my mentors and coaches saying to me, who also is a bald-headed guy, and he said, his name's Paul Check, and he said, 100 years ago, some of the Native and Aboriginal people would actually consider somebody as a part of the tribe who couldn't communicate intuitively with animals and plants even, that something's wrong with them. That, or not that wrong, but that was considered not normal. Now, if somebody said, well, hey, yeah, I talked to my, like yesterday we had Brent Atwater on talking about pet loss is not dead and done, and it was phenomenal. And she was just saying that just because our pets have transitioned and moved on to the other side doesn't mean that we still can't communicate to them in their consciousness, right, or just communicate. And so what are your thoughts on that, about the difference between when it comes to normal and common?
Well, if it's part of creation, it's normal. All right. I always say my definition of God is loving, intelligent, conscious energy. You put those four things together and creation starts, using all those. But what I've also learned, see, again, I've learned that things are true and normal that I never believed in. I have an animal intuitive friend named Amelia Kincaid, who's written some, books about her experience. When I first met her, it was in an elevator in California at an ASPCA meeting convention. And I said to her, what do you do? She said, why are you here? Oh, I'm an animal intuitive. What do you mean? I talk to animals. My reaction was, lady, you're insane. How can you talk to animals? But I test everything. See, I don't close my mind. So when cats have disappeared, and I'm living in Connecticut, and Amelia was in California and Africa at those times, I emailed her. I said, okay, where's the cat? And in one of her emails, it said so clearly, the cat's alive. I can see the moon through its eyes. And she described every detail about the house. One that confused me, it's under the house. Now that made no sense. How can a cat be under the house? But the next morning when I went out and started calling the cat's name, where did I hear a cry from? A stairway that came off the house. And the cat was under the stairway because it came all the way down to the ground, and it had squeezed in to protect itself, from predators, because we're living in a wooded area. And so this cat, in a sense, put itself in a cage to stay alive and protect itself. And then I got it out and brought it back in the house. But she has been incredible in the detail. And that's where I learned the prime source of this ability. It's in many, many places. The quiet mind. Where does the ugly duckling realize he is a swan? Where does a tiger whose mother dies and is brought up by goats find out he's a tiger? Both of them on a still pond.
Yeah.
One, and the other tiger takes him there and says, hey, stupid, you're not a goat, look. And, and the ugly duckling, see, he doesn't leave home cursing his mother. See, here are the words of a human being. My mother's words were eating away at me and maybe gave me cancer. She told me I disappointed her, I was a failure, and she dressed me in dark clothes so nobody would notice me. That is not what the ugly duckling said. Because if he had said that, he never would have seen his beauty, because he'd be busy cursing his mother and seeing what she is telling him. But when you quiet your mind, then amazing things can occur within you, communicating with your mind and body and animals and a whole host of things, knowing the future. I hear voices too. My wife died in January of this year. She's still with me. And I mean that. Mm-hmm. Now, is her body? No. But does she leave me signs and symbols? Yes. Related to meaningful numbers. Oh, I mean, it's really quite amazing. She was born on 9/9, September 9th.
Yeah.
I was in the hospital about a month ago. My wristband, I don't have it on that they give you in the hospital. I have it in another room in the house. I didn't stop to look at it, but when I got home and it was okay, I clipped it off and looked at it. Every number on it adds up to a 9. It's 8 and 1, 5 and 4, 6 and 3, 7, 2. And I know it's my wife saying, "You'll be okay. I'm taking care of you." What I did know was when I came into the emergency room, they said, "You're going into room 9." And when we got upstairs, my hospital room was 819. Okay? And 8 is a new beginning, but it's again a 9/9. I mean, when I saw those things, I knew my wife saying the 8 is you'll be okay, new beginning, you'll go home, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's no way you can explain those numbers. You know, oh, it's a lucky accident. It's no accident.
Yeah. Well, Tammy, can you see the comments when I pull them up here?
Yeah, right.
So Tammy said 513 since my brother died. Yeah, and I think that just to say something real quick on this is that my feeling on it is that if people, there's a great quote, I don't know where it came from, but I really like quotes because it says a lot in a short period of time. And to the believer, no proof needed. To the disbeliever, no proof possible.
Right.
And, you know, I think that when people have had that experience of some kind and they know, then it makes sense. And I think that where people maybe get in trouble is if other people, you know, the disbelievers need the proof. Well, there's none possible. And to the believers, there's no proof needed. Right.
That's why I've learned 2 things. One is to tell stories.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking to a room full of doctors, say, and you recite a research study, that was poorly controlled. That journal is not high quality.
Right.
Or one quote about cancer. Childless women get it, men when they retire. It's as if it had to be an outlet for their foiled creative fire. Now, that's in a poem called Miss G by W.H. Auden. And I was talking about how your emotions, feelings, life can affect your health. And you recite a poem. Just because it rhymes doesn't make it true. But what I've learned is I always tell people, as crazy as it sounds, read fiction if you want to know the truth. Now you'd say, what? The fiction is about the characters that the author is creating.
Yeah.
But the story is the truth.
Yeah.
Because they have observed it. See, Solzhenitsyn talks about self-induced healing in his book, Cancer Ward. He doesn't talk about a spontaneous remission the way a doctor would, because there's intuitively, he knows it's self-induced. It's not a lucky thing that happened to that person. It's related to changes they made in their life, and then their body gets a live message. And, you know, now that we're studying things that we couldn't study, you know, and measure years ago, you see how our emotions in life change our body chemistry and create susceptibility to disease. I always say the simplest example is just good old Monday morning. You have more heart attacks, strokes, suicides, and illnesses on Monday. Why? Because people feel on Monday morning. But when you love your life, see, the other side of the coin is, oh, I have 3 months to live. And then you transform your life. And guess what? 3 months later, you're feeling wonderful. And when Bernie calls to ask why he wasn't invited to the funeral, you answer the phone and say, "It's so beautiful here, I forgot to die." That's a quote, okay? Mm-hmm. Man I thought was dead and called the family to ask why I wasn't invited to the funeral. This is a year later. He was expected to die in a couple of months.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, when he answered the phone and said that, people say to me, "You should write a book with that title. You know, it was so beautiful here, I forgot to die."
Right.
But there are innumerable stories by people. And that's the thing I learned. If they didn't die when they were supposed to, I knew it wasn't spontaneous. I would say, "Hey, how come you didn't die?"
Yeah.
And then they would have a story to tell me. And these are people who weren't trying not to die either, because I always think of this landscaper who was retiring. And when I said to him, you need more treatment, he said, it's springtime. I have to go home, make the world beautiful. So when I die, I'll leave a beautiful world. Now, he didn't show up till 6 years later when he said, I have a hernia from lifting boulders in my landscape business. So he came back for me to fix his hernia. And he lived to 91 and became my therapist.
Oh, wow.
Because if you spent time with John, you saw how beautiful the world was.
Right.
And it just changed you.
And speaking of which, if you don't mind me asking, I had somebody actually talking about that with transitioning. Somebody, Judy, had mentioned, I thought Bernie Siegel was no longer among us. So maybe they mistakenly heard that when your wife passed, that it was you. So you're still obviously alive. And do you mind me asking how, where you are in the age spectrum?
How old I am?
Yeah.
Let me first say this. You can grow old without growing older. Because think about this. If you never know what time it is, how can you get older?
Yeah.
And I mean this literally.
Yeah.
When you leave your body, time does not exist. What made me believe that, again, is not doctors talking to me, but Rodgers and Hammerstein in their show Carousel. The angel says to a man who was murdered, you want to see your daughter graduate from high school? My daughter's a baby. What are you talking about? There's no time up here. That's in the show Carousel. When I heard the angel say that, there's no time up here, I said, I believe,
Yeah.
Not some doctor telling me there's no time when you leave your body. But what I've learned is from two things, being a surgeon and being an artist and portrait painter. In the operating room or when painting a portrait, I have no sense of time. And what struck me once was a phone call that interrupted me when I was painting a portrait. And they were looking for my wife. And I said, she won't be back for a couple of hours. So, wait till you call again.
Right.
Then the phone rings and I pick it up. It's the same person. I said, what the hell's the matter with you? I told you she won't be here for hours and you're going to call me every 15 minutes. And he said, Bernie, it's 2 hours since the last phone call. That blew my mind.
Yeah.
So how much older am I? I'm only 15 minutes older, not 2 hours older. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my real age is 86.
Okay.
But what I know is, that's to say, that's my age from the date of my birth. But is that my age?
Yeah.
I would say no. And we know, again, from studies, when you took seniors and isolated them, like in a camp, and only exposed them to things that they had seen 20 years before, they went home healthier and acting younger. So it's not just time. It's, again, our body and how it senses that time. And when we're doing something that's meaningful and we lose track of time, then your body stops aging, because it's contributing to creation and life.
Yeah, I saw that with my grandma, unfortunately, who just passed this year, where she went into the nursing home. She was unable to care for herself, and her husband, my grandpa, passed away 2 weeks before my parents' wedding, actually. And she went into the nursing home, and in 3 years looked like she aged 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate because she stayed on the farm here until she was 80. I guess 86 or 87, and she was out in the garden and doing stuff, and she was all good. And then, it just got to a point where she couldn't handle it, and it's unfortunate, but you could just see it, and it was sad. And I know that just seeing how much it progressed. So, I mean, I can appreciate what it is that you're sharing there. And I asked only because somebody had mentioned that, wondering they didn't think that you were no longer among us, but you're here. And it's amazing. And I always love hearing your stories. And one of my mentors and coaches, Dr. Stephen LaFay, he's a chiropractor. And I said, yeah, I interviewed Dr. Bernie Siegel. He's like, Dr. Bernie Siegel? He's like, he's still kicking and alive and doing and staying there. And I said, yeah. He just thought it was really cool. So he said he's taken, I think, some of your courses or trainings or been to some of your lectures. And I'm not sure if you remember him at all, but he just said to make sure that I tell you to say hi. Yeah.
Yeah. It, as I say, I just take it one day at a time.
Yeah.
I don't think about how old I am. It's what interests me, because I always say I use the world as my gymnasium.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I love working in landscaping, doing things. And yeah, I see a chiropractor now because I've had a lot of back injuries.
Yeah.
So I can't, keep running marathons anymore. But, well, one message I always take from the New York Marathon, a woman who was standing on the street corner just saying, "You're all winners," as we ran by. You're all winners. Yeah. And you want to talk about signs of God. My first marathon, I ran, I don't know if you know the organization now that runs marathons for cancer, leukemia, lymphoma society. The fellow who started that about 15, 16 years ago called me. He said, "People know you, so I want you to run a marathon." I said, "You're out of your mind. I'm not going to run 26 miles to make you happy." But he never stopped driving me nuts. So I said, "All right, I'll do it. And I started training. But then I said to God, I need a sign. I'm standing in Staten Island before the race began, with thousands of other people. I said, "God, I need a sign." And I looked down, and between my feet was a quarter. And I knew if I found a penny, that's God's sign, 26 miles, you're going to make it. And I was running through Manhattan, and there is the penny right in the street. So I ran off to the sidewalk to double back so I didn't trip anybody or anybody crashed into me. I didn't suddenly stop.
Right.
And I heard one guy run by. It was so funny, yelling, "How poor can he be?" Because he saw me stopping to pick up a penny, But I have that 26 cents. And I knew as soon as I found that penny, you got it. You're going to make it. And, the signs are there, whether it's the coins or the pennies from heaven is what they started being called by grandchildren when my mother was dying, who found dozens of pennies everywhere after she died. And my wife, the same thing. We were married on the 11th, and dimes and pennies. I would find a dime and a penny in so many places. It was just amazing, where they're not going to be accidentally, and then just pennies in many separate places too, all with significant symbols and numbers. But again, if we keep our minds open, these things happen, and just keep sharing the stories, because then people don't walk away saying that's crazy. That was a poorly controlled study. It's a story. It is not threatening them and their belief systems, but it does open their minds.
Right.
That's what we need to do. Keep our minds open. I mean, we have incredible potential. See? And I keep saying, look for common themes, because I got a kick out of Jesus saying, "It is done unto you as you believe." I thought, well, why the hell didn't people yell at him? Why didn't they say, "Why are you blaming us for everything?" It's done unto you as you believe. So it's your fault? No, he's not saying that. He is saying, again, the same things that I would ask people, what's going on in your life? And then they can understand why. Like one woman, she had severe headache, migraines, and was being admitted to the hospital. I asked her, "What does it feel like?" She said, "It's pressure." So I did a meditation for her about relieving pressure. A couple of minutes later, the nurse came over to me and said, "Her headache's gone. She's going home. It's her marriage." Now that impressed me too, see? So I always say to people, I'm not asking you your diagnosis. I'm asking you, what are you experiencing with your disease? How would you describe it? Failure. Well, how does failure fit your life? Well, I have cancer. My body failed. That's not my question. How does failure fit your life? Oh, my parents committed suicide when I was a child. I must have been a failure as a child.
Hmm.
Boom. You know, you see, that's where, again, the story. And now you're really healing people. You're not just treating cancer, you're healing lives.
Yeah, and I think that relating that to like looking at the animals, which by the way, on a side note, your presentation, for those of you who are tuning in live, being joined in with the summit, tomorrow, today's day one at the time of this recording, tomorrow's day two, November the 18th, and Dr. Bernie's presentation is featured up tomorrow. And love, animals, and miracles. And you know, we've been talking a lot about that with the just with the human beings. What's one of your best, most notable stories with what you've learned from the animals?
Well, several. One, it was just our little cat. I mean, I have 4 cats in the house now and 1 dog. I mean, she always walks across the computer and screws it up.
Yeah,
when I get her to walk back, she repairs it. It is hysterical. Don't tell me how she does it, but it works. But one lady had a dream. A cat named Miracle appeared, said, "You have cancer. This is how you need to treat it." And she told her doctor, and he was nice enough to say, "Okay, let's follow the cat's advice." So when one of our kids brought home a cat, I named it Miracle. And she was an incredible miracle. I mean, I used to take her everywhere I went. As a matter of fact, when I say that, I mean that literally. From the time she was a kitten, I just stuffed her up my sleeve and took her everywhere I went. So she wasn't afraid of anything, met everybody, was good with people. And then we had a dog show in town, and I entered her in it. And when I showed up, people said, "What are you doing? This is a dog show." I said, "She thinks she's a dog." Because she used to walk with me, go every place, the way you would take your dog. I said, "She thinks she's a dog. I didn't want to upset her feelings." So she got so much attention at this dog show, including all the dogs, you know, around her, and she wasn't afraid of any of them. The next year, a sign went up that said "Dog Show for dogs only." And I knew they were telling me, "Don't you show up again, you know, with your cat." But Miracle was a miracle. And I try to tell people to learn from the animals. I was just talking to somebody who's in our house. WWLD. What does that mean? It means whenever you have a question, say, "What would Lassie do?" And then do that. See? And because the animals, again, intuitively know what is right for them. You know, they're not thinking all the time. They're feeling and using their inner wisdom. And the other, I mean, and how much they know about us. In a book of miracles, I have one book, Love, Animals, and Miracles. In that, this family, there were 3 women, 2 girls, the mother, and then dad. So one of the daughters wanted to buy a male dog for the father so he'd have another male in the house. And she is murdered by her boyfriend before she can bring him a dog. She had picked one out for him, but some other family had already purchased it at the breeder. A year or 2 went by, and the family, to help them, you know, stop grieving, they thought, "Let's get a dog in her honor." So they went back to the breeder, and they sat down. The breeder blew a whistle to get all the dogs that were running loose to stop. But one dog, instead of stopping, ran over and jumped in the father's lap. He was sitting in a chair. And the breeder said, "Oh my God." They said, "What did we do to upset you?" "Nothing. That's the dog your daughter picked out a year ago. The family had to bring it back." So they adopted it and took it home. But again, it's all these stories. And I've had, dreams where animals have been my symbol of my spirit and were, you know, guiding me. It's just incredible. And if we, again, quiet our mind, so do the meditating, quiet your mind. And when you go to bed at night, pay attention to your dreams. so that when you wake up, you're getting that wisdom from the source, because God speaks in dreams and images, and don't forget that. And that's why I begin to work with drawing. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross asked me questions about my life from an outdoor scene I drew. I don't know where her questions were coming from, but they all were so bright and intelligent, even related to numbers. Why is 11 important? Where'd that come from? You drew 11 trees in the picture. But I immediately knew what the 11 related to in my life, that I had been doing the support group work for 11 months. So it just popped right up. Matter of fact, a reporter in my office thought I was nuts, and I could tell the interview was not going to be pleasant. So I said to her, draw a picture for me. And she drew herself with this enormous head, which said to me again how intellectual she was and the problem. But behind her on the wall was a clock with one hand pointed at 12. So I thought, I got to shake her up. So I just said to her, what happened when you were 12 years old? I don't like deadlines. There's only one hand on the clock. What happened? And then she burst into tears and told me she'd been sexually abused. Mm-hmm. And then the interview was very different after that moment. And so again, people have to understand, as Jung said, numbers have quantity and meaning. And that's a way that we store things in our memories. And as you're willing to look at those things, then you can bring them forth and help them to heal. And it's the healing that can also then lead to the curing. It's not just focusing on, a physical problem, but it's focusing on healing, because we're integrated. And again, this is what medicine doesn't see. I sent articles to medical journals. They got returned. It's interesting, but it's not appropriate for our journal. So I sent it to a psychiatry journal instead of a medical journal. Came back again. It's appropriate, but it isn't interesting. We know all this. Think how upsetting that is. See, that you as a human being are treated like you have pieces. See, not an integrated mind-body unit, but pieces. So you got a mental problem? Go see a psychiatrist.
Right.
You got a heart problem? Go see a cardiologist. See? But what if your heart problem comes from a tragic loss, that's affecting your heart and your emotions and your feelings? I mean, we need to know both things, not just, and it upsets me. It's always hard for me to stop saying these things. But you read a medical journal, say, I was depressed. There's an ad by a pharmaceutical company. I'm depressed, unable to cope. I went to see my physician. He prescribed an antidepressant. I feel better now. I wrote the company. I said, don't you think you ought to put in one more sentence? I went to my doctor. I said, I'm depressed. He asked me what's going on in my life. And then he prescribed an antidepressant. And they don't change the ad. And to just hand somebody a pill and say, okay, goodbye, I'll see you in a month, give you another pill. What the hell? How does that solve their life's problems and why they're depressed?
Well, I think that's where I really appreciate that, because I think that really relates to just in general, the purpose and the intention and the vision for this Animal Wellness Summit was to reach and educate and inspire millions of people around the world to get better in touch and in tune with the plant and animal kingdom. And the purpose of that, connecting it with what you just said, is that the responsibility that we have as human beings, but also as pet parents and animal lovers,
right,
to have that on the onus of ourselves to take that responsibility, because stuff can happen and there's a purpose. I believe, as you are an MD talking to you as a doctor, my mom was a registered nurse for 40 years, and I believe there's a place and a purpose for that. But for the conventional allopathic approach, I also think that there's a huge need for us to be more empowered by being better connected to our own intuition, which will, and as you're all everybody watching is going to learn, you know, beyond what you already know, I'll presume what you already know now, is that through better connection of our intuition, we can, you know, maintain that connection for ourselves, but also with our pets and animals, because that is a big challenge that I see and have observed since we started this whole project. That people feel just completely disempowered, like they don't know anything, they can't do anything, right? And that's a scary.
These lessons are not new. Maimonides, 1,000 years ago, said two simple things. One is, because too often people think of God as punishing them, and religion can add to that. Say, God decides who gets cancer and smallpox, and I mean, it's amazing, the history of religion and disease. But he said, remember that disease is a loss of health. If you find what your neighbor lost, return it to him.
Right.
The other was even more striking. Quote, if people took as good care of themselves as they do their animals, they would suffer fewer illnesses. That's over 1,000 years ago.
Wow.
Cat Fancy magazine, probably a year or two ago, at least, it blew my mind because a woman wrote a full-page letter into the magazine and they published it. It's about having 9 cats, and my husband and I smoke indoors. The cats are developing asthma and breathing problems. And then one of them developed lung cancer. And so my question always to the audience is, now that your cats are getting sick and cancer, what do you do about your smoking? Now, most unintelligent people say, well, you stop smoking. No, that is not her answer. Her letter ends with this. Doug and I now smoke in the yard. We love our cats more than the convenience of smoking indoors. We're not killing our cats anymore. We hope you're not killing yours. That blew my mind because the magazine didn't make a comment even about, folks, you're killing yourselves, you know, stop and think about it. Be as good to yourself as you are to your cats. And they didn't publish my comments when I wrote them in. But how somebody could write, we're not killing our cats anymore.
Right.
Stop and think, yeah, but you're killing yourselves, you know, by continuing this. And that's why people need to love themselves. The hard part is parenting. That's where trouble begins. You know, the messages you get from those who bring you up. You're a failure, you embarrass me. You know, when you grow up with that, you're in for big trouble. Study of Harvard students. Did your parents love you? No. 98% had suffered a major illness by middle age. Yes, my parents loved me. 24% had suffered a major illness. And we need to bring our kids up with love and with a reverence for life. That's why having the animals in the house.
Yeah.
In my book, Love, Animals, and Miracles, I discussed the Siegel Zoo. We have 5 kids, and they were the farm hands, you know. I mean, we didn't live on a farm, but I put fences up around the house, and all the creatures lived on our property. And the love that went on, because every time I mention that, all eggs were hatched in our house in incubators. So who do you think your parent is? The kids, because the first thing you see when you pop out of an egg is this kid.
Right.
When the school buses would come and our kids would go down the driveway to get on, the ducks and geese went with them to get on the school bus. I mean, the bus drivers were nice and friendly and didn't get mad at us, but it was crazy. And my folks lived on a lake. So when we would get so many ducks and geese that the front yard was ridiculous, we would let them go where my folks lived. And the first time we did it, my mother called me immediately and said, I have a question from our neighbors. What is it? The ducks and geese come out of the lake, walk a half a mile up to the road every time there's a school bus. I said, oh, Ma, it's breaking my heart. They're looking for our kids. But you see the attachment?
Yeah.
And if we can have that kind of attachment with other living things, then, yeah, it supports us and our health. I mean, a study in Australia, You have a heart attack, go home to a house with a dog. A year later, 6% of the people had died. Go home to a house with no dog, 24% of the people had died.
Yeah.
And again, it isn't just taking your dog for a walk. It's the relationship that is so important. And how often the animals know who's going to live and who's going to die. Some of the cats in nursing homes are always making the staff aware, who needs them. And one guy I knew said his father was so sick. He was at home, but so sick that the dog wouldn't leave his side. And he had to feed him in the bedroom and drag him outside to pee and poop. And then one day he said, I came home from work, the dog was in the kitchen. And I knew my father was getting better, that he never would have left his side. And he walked into the bedroom, and of course, his father was feeling better. But, we sense that about each other. The animals have a quieter mind, so it's easier for them than it is for us. But again, if we quiet our mind, we know.
You said that earlier. You said that earlier about the quiet mind, and more that the animals, they don't think. And I have said that before, more so. I observed it where they don't have a conditioned, rational thinking mind. They intuitively or instinctively react and respond. And so they don't have to process all of this with shoulds or shouldn'ts. They just are connecting. And I think that that's what's so amazing about the summit, with all the presenters sharing a different piece to help contribute to completing a better understanding of how we can best connect with our pets and animals. And
I like to say, let your heart make up your mind.
Right.
Pay attention to feelings, not just what do I think, will impress people. What do I think I ought to do? Let your heart make up your mind. And that's where the drawings help again. I mean, there are people who draw the devil giving them poison as the treatment for their disease. And others draw it as a gift from God. See, and again, the power of the mind. 2 radiation therapists. One thought he was treating people when he wasn't, because the machine was repaired and they didn't put the radioactive material back in. A month later, when he checked it, which is the routine inspection, he realized he hadn't treated anybody. And I said to him, you're not an idiot. He said, no, I'm not. How come you didn't know you weren't treating people? And he almost fainted when I said to him, it's because the patients acted as if they were being treated. What they were.
Right.
So they had side effects, shrinking tumors, typical. He almost fainted.
Yeah.
And the other side of the coin was the radiation therapist who called me to say, Bernie, I have a patient here who has no reaction to radiation. I thought the machine was broken. Then I saw your name in her chart, so I knew it was a crazy patient. So I said to her, how come you have no reaction? She said, I get out of the way and I let it go to my tumor. Okay? And another woman, just so you understand how this changes doctors when they experience it. I mean, these are doctors who thought I was nuts, oncology group that I worked with. And they criticized me and told me it's crazy. You don't know what you're doing. You may be hurting people, instead of helping them with all your support groups and teaching what you're teaching them. But as the years went by, they saw the difference.
Right.
So a woman was brought up here from North Carolina, because a relative of hers was helping our family. And she said to her, oh, Dr. Siegel makes people well all the time. Come on up. Because the doctor told her she'd be dead in a few months and not to bother to go through therapy and just feel sick. She came up, she had leukemia, told her that was not something I treated, gave her a big hug, got my oncologist friend to come over and see her at the hospital. He sent me a note, email, saying, Bernie, I agree with her doctor. She probably has a couple of months to live, but I know you and your crazy patients, so I'll give her hope. See, he had been changed by the experience of my crazy patients. I'll give her hope.
Mm.
A week later, I get an email, doing well. And then every week he'd send me an email, doing very well, incredible. After about 6 or 8 weeks, the email said she's in complete remission, no sign of cancer. Okay. And that's the part that impressed him and his group of oncology friends, because they saw what could happen. It wasn't Bernie Siegel giving a lecture. It was a crazy patient, and look what happened. So let's give him hope. What do we got to lose?
Yeah, but that is that is great. And I think, as I said to you earlier, I know you had some stuff on the go there today when we talked about the call. I want to keep this relatively short because I know we can go on and on.
Right.
And I love it. I love it. I don't want to cut us off.
Let me teach you something, and from animals now.
Yeah.
I mean, all the lessons they taught me. We had a house rabbit that we saw this rabbit out in the woods, and we trapped it in a have-a-heart trap and brought it in. And, you know, they're like having a cat in the house, you know, toilet trained, and it's just such a sweet thing. And how smart she was, because she liked to have her stomach rubbed. So when I would be reading a magazine on the sofa, she would jump up, grab the magazine in her teeth, throw it on the floor, and basically say to me, rub my stomach, never mind the damn magazine. But one of the dogs grabbed her and wounded her. And when I would care for her wound, I knew I was hurting her when she would lick my hand. That impressed me. She didn't turn her head and bite my finger. She licked my hand. Then a few weeks later, I went out to bring her in from the front yard, which is fenced in, where let all the pets go. And I couldn't find her. And I saw the dog that had bitten her lying on the ground. So I thought, well, I'll pet him as I go by. So I bent over to pet him, and who's lying underneath him? Smudge was hiding under the dog so I wouldn't see her and bring her in. But what impressed me, think about that forgiveness. He attacked her, could have killed her. You know, I mean, he grabbed her like she was a stuffed animal and just shook her one day. And here she is now, and was best friends with him, and he is hiding her so she doesn't have to go in the house. That impressed me, what animals teach us about forgiveness. And I think if we could, again, live what they're teaching us, then some wonderful things start to happen. And I know, you know, when I say about talking to animals, I learned one day when she was running around the yard and wouldn't let me bring her in, I stopped and I quieted my mind and I said, why won't you let me pick you up? And she said, you don't treat the cats that way. Now that blew my mind too, to hear a rabbit say, you don't treat the cats that way. I said, I let them stay out because they can protect themselves, but I worry about you. You know, if a predator jumped the fence, you can't climb a tree to get away. And from that day on, she would let me bring her into the house. And I think that's the part that's so wonderful. When we quiet our minds, how we communicate at every level, you know, with all creatures and all things. Yeah.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. That story is powerful. I know you shared briefly that one the last time we had spoke. And yeah, I think it's great. I love the stories. I like to tell stories myself, and like to believe that they're teaching people on some levels when I'm telling the stories. And so tomorrow, your presentation is going to be on the summit. So for those of you who are on live now, you're going to be able to see Dr. Bernie Siegel's, and we are going to wrap things up for today because Dr. Bernie has some things he's got to do today, and so do I, and I know you guys do too. So thanks for joining on live. And actually, we have one of the other presenters who's on today, Trisha Working, who just jumped on. And do you want to come on quick, Trisha, and just say hi? Okay, just hang on a sec. I got to bring you in here. We'll say hi to Dr. Bernie, and then we're going to wrap things up for today. There you go. You're on here now.
Thanks, Barney. Hey, Dr. Bernie, this is your stuff is always so wonderful, and this is phenomenal. And I agree with Petra. Let's make it a global animal wellness summit. Fabulous work, Barney.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, this is great. So we're going to go, Trisha, we'll bring you on one of the other Facebook Lives, and for everybody watching live still, and or after as a replay every day for the rest of the summit. So days 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 at 5 p.m. Eastern. Just tune into the page. I have to send a unique link in each day's email, and I'm going to have some of the presenters on just so you guys can get to know them a little bit more. And we can sit around the metaphorical fire and listen to some great stories like Dr. Bernie just shared with us. And I am, just so you know, Bernie, I'm going to get your book, but I'm also going to get it on Audible. So I want to show you guys who are on, if you have Audible or have any podcast or book listening device, you can get all of Bernie's books on Audible. There's quite a few of them on here. I didn't realize you had this many books. And also, I will put a link to Dr. Bernie's books on the chat here. He has his own website where you can go and get his book, specifically the one that he mentioned, that's Love, Animals, and Miracles. And that's what he's going to be elaborating a little bit more on during his presentation during tomorrow. So thank you, Dr. Bernie and Trisha, for the last little jump in there. And have a great day, guys. As I like to say, stay blessed, stay grateful, stay humble, and stay hungry to keep learning and growing. And we'll see you on the next call. Thanks again, Dr. Bernie, for jumping on.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. Okay, guys, we'll see you. And Trisha. We'll see you.
Look up a poem named Rags on the internet. That's the last message to all of you. Rags.
What is that?
It's a poem by Edmund Vance Cook. It's about a dog named Rags.
Okay.
The poem is a wonderful lesson to teach us all.
Okay. So see if we can find that on the web.
Yes. Oh, you won't have trouble. Just look up Rags.
Okay. All right, guys. That's good. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later. Okay. Bye-bye.